What are people's thoughts on the goalkeeper battle? What's best for, I mean, I think Max Crepeau is the starter until proven otherwise, but what's best for a guy like Hasal this year, and how do you see it kind of playing out long term?
Well, for me, so like right at the start, Hasal obviously he burst onto the scene. Like for the first 3 or 4 games, he'd saved the most goals above expected of any keeper in the league.
Which really says something about the Whitecaps, not just
Right.
Hasal.
I mean, he was completely like thrown into the whatever you call it, right into the
The deep
fire.
end.
The deep end. There you go. That's in many ways the opposite of a fire, but we move. But so he started off with this super high peak, and then over time, again, like keeping in mind he was not put in a good position at all. But over time, that slowly came down until he was at the point where he was like, definitely still an MLS level keeper, but he was pretty solidly in the bottom half. And to me, that says the potential and the ability is definitely there, but maybe the consistency is not quite there yet. So personally, I would like to see him loaned out. Apparently, they're going to let him compete for that spot at the start of the season. I'm not sure that's how I would approach it, but I guess we'll see what happens.
I honestly would take it a step further, and I would be completely okay if they sell him. Partly for exactly what Caleb was just saying. Like, he reminds me of, and forgive this is a hockey reference on a soccer video, but just bear with me. 100% reminds me of Andrew Hammond from the Ottawa Senators like 5 years ago. The guy that they started calling the Hamburglar because
That
he
was
basically.
not a comp I expected to hear on this show. That's hilarious.
But I mean, like, if you like know the story of Hammond, like he basically dragged the Senators from the bottom of the league and carried them into the playoffs. Got a huge contract out of it, and then like the next year was like okay, not great, but not worth the contract. And then within a year after that, I think he was gone from the team altogether. All I'm getting at is that like when Hasal got thrown in there, thrown into the fire, and he performed like amazingly at first, like it's like the game stops stock. It's not going to get any higher. It's not like we're abusing the system here, but it's going to peak. And if they actually are wanting to make money, like the club, then you have to sell them or loan them out or do something. And it sucks because I'm all for watching him flourish, but unless Crepeau breaks his other hand, like I don't think he's going to get that chance anytime soon. It sucks to say, but I think like the right thing might be just to either, yeah, like Caleb said, loan him or sell him while you can. Like he may be too good for being a backup, or he may not good enough. But let that be another team's problem to figure out.
Yeah, I guess the way I come at this, and this is a little bit like where Caleb was coming at it, I think my take is loan Hasal out now, give Crepeau another year starting, and then I mean for keepers it's a little harder because their age peak is later. But I think 27, 28 for Crepeau, that's probably as high value point as you're going to get, and probably you're reaching the end at which point you're going to be able to sell him for a decent sum. And at that point, then you turn things over to Hasal, and hopefully you would see some growth there in the next year where you would be comfortable having him as your starter. The problem is I'm not sure who you would loan Hasal out to because he's too good for the Canadian Premier League, and he'll take up an international roster spot for a USL team. So I would be interested who the takers would be on an Hasal loan, because I think the market might not quite be there.
One of the challenges with the CPL is that goalkeeper might be like the best position within that league. There's a lot of clubs with really good goalkeepers already. And so I don't know if that's one where there's a ton of clubs clamoring for another guy or not looking to necessarily bring in Hasal to supplant the guy that they've invested in on loan. It's just kind of like a delicate situation, although I do think a lot of CPL clubs would probably try to bring him in if they could. But I think you're right, Andrew. He's right at that point where he's almost too good for CPL. The USL will be challenging. He's just kind of in that tweener position where I'm not sure if there's like a great fit in the North American ecosystem right now.
No, just like send him to Sweden or something.
Eric Hurtado style, or was that Norway? I think that was Norway, actually. I take that back.
I forgot about that.
He was in.
Yes,
Hurtado was in like the Norwegian second division, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Or like Meyer Bevan. Remember Meyer Bevan? He got loaned to the Swedish third division for a team that was called like Husqvarna. It was named after a chainsaw company. But Montreal last year had Pantemis on loan at Valor, right? Did they bring in anyone to replace him?
That's a good question, actually. I should know this, but I'm not entirely sure I do. And he's on the U23 roster now, correct?
Yes. He looks like he's gonna be the starting keeper.
Yeah. So I think there are openings within CPL. It's just like a fit within what they have in their ecosystem and whether it makes sense for that club.
The biggest problem with Hasal basically is the emotional attachment we have to him. Like, it's great. We know that he's the next logical step after Crépeau, but we're not done with Crépeau yet, and we don't want to let him go as hard as it is. But like that loan is definitely going to be important if we want to see him develop, because he needs regular game time, especially U23 level 2, or just being a backup for the Canadian national team. Dane St. Clair is doing wonders with Minnesota, so he's direct competition for Hasal for like the next 10 or so years, and he's not going to want to be left behind.
So I've kind of been thinking about this problem a little bit because I'm a freak who thinks about the Whitecaps all the time. And right now, Crépeau's transfer market value is 1.32 million. So I wanted to pose the question to the group. If you got offered that, if you were transported into Axel Schuster's body, would you take an offer of that amount? I feel I would be tempted. I'd have to think about it. I'd have to go on like a long walk. I'd have to really dig deep inside my soul. I'd have to think about it.
I just don't think his value is getting much higher, and I think you got to capitalize, when you can on an asset like that, especially given how that keeper is a position of strength for the Caps, and they haven't had very many of those in recent years.
Yeah, maybe this is an optimist union take, and I'm trying to separate this from the fact that I really like Max Crépeau. Is just a guy, like, he's great to talk to and just seems like the nicest of all people, but like, hell yeah, I would take that. I feel like I feel like the vibes I'm picking up from Caleb, I'm a lot higher on Hasal than Caleb is, and I think, yeah, you gotta cycle players in and out, and I feel like, as Andrew said, I'm not sure that value's getting a lot higher, and I feel like, if you want to be this young club that develops players, you got to just go all in on that model, and I think selling on a guy like Crépeau would fit within that kind of philosophy.
I mean, if you can turn 50K in GAM, which is like theoretical money, like it's not even a real thing, and turn that into 1.32 million in cold hard cash, you kind of have to at least consider it.
I also think Yusuf Daha is like the truth. Every goalkeeper he touches turns into a really serviceable player. So I have a lot of belief in that. You've got Isaac Boehmer in the system, super inexperienced. He's going to need some time, but they have a really good goalkeeping staff. So I think there's also the prospect of developing guys down the line there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just think back to 2018 and Marinovic, and just how it felt like that team needed a solid goalkeeper. So now that we have him, I really don't want to let him go.
Yeah, honestly, we kvetched quite a bit about that team, but like their two goalkeepers were both in the bottom 5 of goals saved above expected. Like they were letting in more goals than expected, both of them by like quite a big amount. So if they'd had like a reasonably good goalkeeper, we might be living in a totally different world right now. We might be living in the world of God King Carl. Like, that team was pretty close to making the playoffs, honestly. And
there's a
maybe
good keeper away from that.
Now it's like the reverse. Every other part of the team for the last 2 years has been way below water, but the goalkeeping has been good.
Well, we're talking alternate histories. Like the alternate history I wonder about is what if Zach McMath had won the starting job way back when?
I remember predicting in one of our, I think all of us really, and in one of those preseason roundtables, at least, I guess this is minus Luis because this was maybe before your time, but we were asked to predict the split between Zach McMath and Max Carpeau, and I think we all kind of went like 50-50 down the middle, and then it ended up being like 90%, 10% or something like that, and I certainly felt a little bit silly at the end of the year because it didn't seem self-evident to start, but like 2 weeks into the season, all of a sudden it was very clear what was going on.
Right, like there's a galaxy somewhere out there where Carpeau's about to, start for this new Saskatchewan CanPL expansion team.
I was gonna say, if they managed to get that team out this year, we could have sent Hasal there. It would have been a homecoming for him. That would have been great, but unfortunately, we got to wait a couple of years for that.
Hopefully, by the time that team gets up and running, the thought of sending Hasal to the Canadian Premier League will be laughable because he'll have moved so far beyond that.
That's the worst part about it. No homecoming for him.
All right. Well, do we want to move on? Let's move on to another less enticing position at times, but one that's definitely worth talking about nonetheless, and that's the center backs on the roster. Unless you're going to go a little bit crazy outside the box and play 3 at the back, you've got a competition. Caleb's already shaking his head saying he doesn't want to see that. But unless you're going to do that, you're looking at 2 spots available for essentially, in the way I view it at least, unless there's something about Yasser Khmiri we don't know, it's down to Derek Cornelius, Ranko Vasilinovic, and Eric Godoy. So I guess I'll open it up by asking the masses, what do you think of that competition? Who do you want to see as the 2 starting center backs? And overall, how confident are you in that group going into this season?
Well, I'm very confident in Eric Godoy, but beyond that, I don't know a lot of things for sure. They seem pretty committed to making Ranko work. And, he had a very rough start to his time as a Whitecap, but like he was improving at the end, like stats wise, eye test wise, he was definitely like a lot less shaky when he was playing, like when he was glued to Godoy. If that continues, maybe that works out. I kind of feel Cornelius, as I'm sure all of you feel, has been kind of unnecessarily relegated to like a backup position. I don't think it's clear really that Rank is a better player than him at this time, but that seems to be the direction that they're like really dedicated in moving towards. All we can really do, I guess, is hope that Ranko like continues that growth, if that wasn't an anomaly.
I'd say there's solid indication to believe that. I mean, I personally really like Cornelius, so it was really, really frustrating to see him left out a lot last season. But now he's getting his game time, his well-deserved game time, I'd say, in the Olympic qualifiers. But I said in my article that he's gonna have to prove his place by putting on a show there. But I don't think even if he does put in a good shift, it'll change much for the upcoming starting day lineup or the lineup for the rest of the season in center back partnership.
Well, that is kind of the thing you have to remember about Cornelius is like I was like almost kind of surprised that he was still eligible to be on the under-23 team because he's been a professional for a long time, but like I think he's the same age as David Egbo, who's going to be,
and he's not that much older than Ranko. Everyone views Ranko as the young guy and Derek as the wily veteran, and I think they're separated by less than a year in terms of age.
Oh yeah,
I've got Transfer Market open right now. It's about a year and a half.
Okay, so I'm wrong there. I'll have to take the L on that one, but
It's
still less than we
super
perceive.
close. Yeah.
People get very weird because there's so many players in MLS that are like entering their professional career at different times. People tend to get a very like skewed sense of how old people actually are. Like how Brett Levi was always being described as a youngster and he was like 26.
Well, one thing I'll be interested with Ranko, just because his passing was so garbage, and that I think was one of the enduring features in my mind. But now, if you have a Baldissimo Alexandra midfield, you're not going to need to build out from the back as much, hopefully. And so that might maybe the eye test might be a little less severe. And I mean, it's a good point. I mean, he looks so much better when Godoy was back there and they could form a relationship. And you hope that there will also be a little bit of that, once you get Gaspar in and settled, that when they get a solid back line, I know the left back position will be a little iffy with international duty, but once they can find kind of a cohesive unit, hopefully that will help.
I think also having Janio Bakel as a shield in front of that back line more regularly will help them all improve quite a bit, because there was a pretty direct correlation between him playing more and the goals going down. I think they were pretty exposed for that sort of, from the MLS's back period to the end of the games they played in Canada. It was pretty much just open season on that back line. They didn't have a lot of support. So I think, his presence, I think Bakel is one of the most underrated Whitecaps, honestly. I think he'll hopefully show that he can elevate the performances of the defense, because they won't have to do as much.
Hopefully he won't have to do as much as well either. I mean, I distinctly remember him taking his fair share of cards during that latter half of the season. But in all fairness to guys who play that way, sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's actually a bad tackle, and sometimes it's bailing out the guys around you for having made a bad pass, and you have to take that professional foul. I don't think his are all terrible, but he kind of had a good steady mix of all three of those columns when it came to his level of defending like that. When if he's got guys who can make passes in around him and he doesn't have to bail them out, then yeah, hopefully we'll be able to see him flourish a lot more.
I'm really hoping that guys like Gaspar, like Alexandra, even a guy like Caicedo that they've brought in, if they're all really willing and capable to track back properly, it alleviates a little bit of this pressure. And as you guys have all pointed out, if everyone just does their job, then it makes the task less significant overall. And so hopefully a guy like Bakel can prosper, and then you see Ranko and Eric Godoy, if those are the two guys that are starting pairing, they're put in a position where the expectations are reasonable. And I felt like that was it. The center back position doesn't want for a lack of talent, but it has wanted for a more reasonable level of expectation. It just felt like at times last year it was you need to cover these 6 guys in the box, and good luck. If you can't do that, we're going to get scored on. So you guys have all kind of hit on the DC versus Ranko debate, and anyone who's listened to the podcast I do will know how I feel about that position battle. I feel like the Whitecaps have kind of boxed themselves into a corner there by committing to Ranko so wholeheartedly, and I feel like DC's a little underrepresented, but I think either way they go, that's a position group to feel confident about. So it's the least of their problems overall, and it's nice that there's fewer of these position groups now where we really feel like there's a glaring hole other than the one we all know about.